Chapter 2, If You Had Lived in the Colonies. Growing up, what would it have been like to grow up in the colonies? Let's spend a little time finding out. We'll begin by imagining that you are a colonist and what your family and daily life looks like. Your family probably lives on a farm. 9 out of 10 colonial families live on farms. Chances are your house is pretty crowded. That's because colonists have large families. You have lots of brothers and sisters. What are the chances you have your own bedroom? Just about 0. Not only do you not have your own bedroom, you don't have your own bed. You share a bed or a straw mattress on the floor with other children in the family. On page 11 it says, many colonial children had lots of brothers and sisters. While the house is crowded, you are grateful to have so many kids in the family. You don't have neighborhood friends because you don't have a neighborhood. Only people living in villages and towns have neighbors, so your brothers and sisters are your built-in playmates. Of course, everyone has regular chores to do. That includes you. Everyone's day begins at dawn, if not before. That means when the sun is coming up. That's super early. If you are a boy, your first job is to bring in firewood and build the fire. Matches don't yet exist, so you hope there is still a burning coal in the fireplace from the night before. And if not, you have to start a new fire. You guys picturing this with me? After breakfast, our morning prayers. You head out to the fields with your father. You plant and hoe and clear away brush from the new land that's to be planted next year. You'll even repair a fence or two. So after you pray every morning, then you have to go out to plant and hoe and prepare all the crops in the garden. It says colonial children worked hard. Now I'm on page 13. If you are a girl, you help your mother make candles and preserve foods, starting right after breakfast. Your chores probably also include feeding the animals. The rest of your morning is spent helping cook the noon meal. In the afternoon, you sew, knit, weave, or spin yarn. Did you notice there is no time in your day's schedule for school? That's because you probably don't go to school. Perhaps you did last year and the year before, but you can read and write now. Most colonial parents feel that once you could do that, you don't need any more school. Imagine that. Chances are, though, you learn to read and write at home. An older brother or sister, or maybe a parent teaches you when you are 5 or 6. If no one in your family can read, then you might be sent to learn at another farmhouse where someone else can. It is considered important to learn how to read. Children of enslaved people. So now they're talking about the people who came here, what we talked about yesterday, came here from Africa against their own will. They didn't come here because they wanted to start a new life. They came here because they had to. So now this is about the children of those people. If you are a child in an enslaved family on a plantation, your life is different. When you are quite young, say 5 or 6, there is plenty of time for play. In fact, some of your playmates are probably the children of the plantation owner. That means you have to play for who your parents work for. You may fish, pick berries, and freely explore the plantation fields together. Then, when you reach 7 or 8 years old, you start to take care of younger brothers and sisters. Also, the plantation owner begins to give you jobs, like sweeping the yard, feeding the chickens, and collecting the eggs. Even at this age, however, you start to understand that you do not have the same freedoms as the plantation owner's children. There's a picture on 14 of the enslaved people working in the fields. So the children of the enslaved people had a harder life than the children of the people who had just gone there to start a new life. The big chance in your life comes when you are about 10 years old. Now you begin life as an enslaved worker. At 10, you start working, like work. You work in the fields doing the same hard work as adults. Think about that. That's how old you guys are. You plant, plow, and pick cotton from sunup to sundown. Unlike the plantation owner's children, you probably can't read. Depending on the colony you live in, the law may actually forbid anyone from teaching you to read. So the colonists and the enslaved people, their children have different rights. The enslaved people, they're not allowed to read, and then there's laws saying nobody's allowed to teach them to read. That doesn't seem fair. I'm still on page 15 under the subheading Sicknesses and Cures. Sickness is a very serious problem in colonial life. In every colonial home, many children die from disease. Little is really known about why people get sick or how they can get well and stay well. A lot of people think they know, though. They make their own medicines from plants called herbs and also roots from barks of trees. Do you have a cut that isn't healing? Swelling that won't go down? A bad cold, perhaps? Sure, there's an herb or root that will cure you. Some of these herbs have been used for hundreds of years and really do seem to help. Others, though, are not so helpful. There are some special tricks that are supposed to help you get better. For example, to bring down a fever, your parents might cut your toenails, put the clippings in a small linen bag, and tie the bag around your neck. Tie the bag around the neck of an eel before putting the eel in a tub of water. When the eel dies, your fever supposedly goes down. One of the best educated men in the Massachusetts colony recommends that cure. Even if you are just feeling tired, there's a special recipe to help. You roast a toad and grind it up. Then you add boiling water to make that kind of tea. Drink it, and you'll be feeling lively in no time. For a sore throat or a cold, sprinkle pepper on a piece of meat and wrap it around your throat. On page 16, it says colonial cures. Feed your children only plain foods and not so much sugar, spice, or salt. No eating between meals, except for dry bread. That means no snacks. 2. Keep them away from candy. 3. See that they sleep on a hard bed, no soft feathers. 4. Bathe them in cold water, even in the winter. 5. Give them very thin shoes that will leak and let in water. A famous man got this idea by noting that poor people often went barefoot and didn't seem to get sick from that. 6. Strawberries, cherries, and gooseberries are good for children. Melons, peaches, plums, and grapes are not, even though they are tasty. Don't give them any. Page 17. Of course, you could go to a doctor, but there are few doctors in the colonies. But visiting one probably wouldn't do much good. There are no special schools for training doctors in the colonies. Doctors don't know much more than most others about making people well. Doctors do have a favorite cure for almost any illness, though. It's called bleeding the patient. To do this, doctors cut a vein in the patient's arm to let the blood come out. Of course, the best thing to do is stay well. Wow, so they were talking about if we had lived in the colonies at that time, and there are already a few ways we heard about, life was very different. I don't know about you, but they said here, chances are your houses are pretty crowded. You have lots of brothers and sisters. You might have to share a bed with your brothers and sisters. That might be different for each one of us. Also, it says your day begins at dawn. Now, I wake up in the morning before the sun gets up. I'm not sure all of you do because school doesn't start till 8:15. This means people are getting up at like 4 in the morning to start work, bring in firewood. They didn't have matches yet, so if you're a little boy, you're trying to start a fire, hoping that a coal is still lit from the day before. Can you imagine carrying firewood around at 4 a.m., trying to light a fire? And after all that, then you have breakfast, then you have to pray, and then you head out to the fields. This is probably all before 8:15 in the morning. And you have to hoe, so there's a lot of work. Even girls, you have to help your mom make candles, do the chores, feed the animals, spin the yarn. Remember they said there's no time for school in your schedule. Once you read and write, school's not so important. So if you were growing up in the colonies, once you learn how to read and write, you wouldn't have to go to school anymore. Then it says also a lot of people were homeschooled. Then they talked about the people of the enslaved, or the children of the enslaved people. Remember it said they didn't have the same rights as the people that they worked for. Their kids couldn't go to school. There was even a law that said they couldn't go somewhere else for someone to teach them how to read. So at this time, we're noticing people have different rights. And then it said once you get older and you're that child working for an enslaved person, you have to start working at age 10. So if you're the child of a person who's a slave, you work at age 10, that means now for some of you. Or at the end of this year, you'd be starting to do the work that adults do, from sunup to sundown. And then lastly, they were talking about sicknesses and cures. Medicine wasn't so great back then. They said the main cure doctors like to give was cutting your arm to let you bleed out. So imagine you have a cold and you go to the doctor and you need something to make you feel better, and then they just drain blood in your arm. Seems odd. So I think back then doctors really didn't know what they were doing. Also, this chart they said on page 16, the colonial cures, those sound pretty silly to me. It says keep everyone away from candy. You can eat certain fruits, but you can't eat others. So medicine was way different back then, and I'm sure glad I'm alive today because doctors seem like they know what they're doing a lot more. So tell me what you think about life was like back in the colonies and what would have been your least favorite part in your homework tonight.